But I just want to acknowledge that our nation is in a period of grieving. We're in a period of mourning because we've all lost something. And that loss might look different from person to person, whether it's loss of a loved one, whether it's the loss of income stability, the loss of the freedom to just go and move around places, or just simple connection with other people. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were discussing the idea that we are all designed to grieve. Such a cool concept. It's literally embedded in our DNA. I mean, Jesus wept. Sorry. The corniness will come out, but that's what happens when you're around kids all the time. But we aren't meant to just step over something like it didn't happen and move on with life and adapt so easily. But we're meant to go through the process of acknowledging that we lost something, acknowledging what we lost and what that loss meant to us. So the way that I have been approaching navigating this transition from operating in a physical space to now a virtual one is I'm treating this like I'm dealing with a grieving child, because I am. And I think that we all are in a sense. So what I've done is I've identified 3 key areas that we are going to dig into and explore today that personally our groups focus on here at our church. And my hope is that you guys will find these tools useful to use in your ministry groups as well. So if you are ready and you are with me, just drop a number 3 in the chat. So first, when we are talking about child grief, the first thing we want to do is to make sure that the adults in the child's world are taken care of, that those adults are able to support their child's needs. So when I say the adults in the child's world, that could be parents, caregivers, teachers, spiritual leaders. But again, for the sake of this conversation, we're going to be talking about their spiritual leaders. So the first one, it's on the slide, is leadership adaptation. So helping our leaders to adapt. And what I've learned is that it's more about leading our teams to adapt first before we can ever start creating an experience for our kids. One way I like to do this is through check-ins. And as a leader, I have grown to appreciate, and I know it might sound crazy, even in the midst of what can feel like total chaos and uncertainty, but I have really grown to appreciate having more time in this period to check on my volunteers on issues that they're facing, especially those things outside of ministry, outside of their roles and their responsibilities of the church. Because what I've learned is that when people feel seen and when they feel connected with, and when you're able to address these personal needs that they have, they're more willing to put forth the energy to build the ministry up. So checking on your team members is so important, especially those team members that might be a little bit quieter. I think those are the ones that are easy to fall between the cracks or kind of just fade into the background. So checking on them as well, being really intentional about reaching out to your members. And those check-ins happen with consistent communication. And this may be overkill, and I can acknowledge that it might be overkill. But the way that I lead, I am a relational leader. So I believe in encouragement, support, getting down in the trenches with my teams, really supporting them and building community. So I check on everyone that I serve every single day. And I know that everybody doesn't have that capacity, and that's not, something that everyone wants to implement, but I think that that's important for me. And I think it's important to keep fellowshipping a priority, to keep celebrating people a priority, whether that's a birthday, whether that's meeting goals that we set at the beginning of the week, whether that's just meeting accomplishments that they've been able to achieve in their outside lives. Again, most of the time, it's not ministry based. Just for an example, a few weeks ago, our kids ministry decided to host a virtual brunch. So everybody prepared their own meals, and we just kind of sat down and laughed and we talked. And it was just a way for us to build community and to have a type of grounding in the midst of everything that's going on. And so sometimes the event is not going to be as structured as that. Sometimes it's a fun game that I'll throw in a group chat, or maybe it's an article that I found that I think that someone might find interesting. So I'll put it in there. Or it might even be me inviting them to join a Bible plan with me. Because with the Bible plan, The other part of that is I want to make sure that not only are our groups maintaining personal development, but they are maintaining spiritual development as well. I want them to feel equipped and competent to handle whatever we're facing, whether that's right now, whether that's in the future. I want them to feel like they're capable to handle what or what we're called to carry. And Dr. Pam Ross said it best. She said, "The real you is the you under pressure. The real you is the you under pressure." And I want to make sure that they are handling the pressure well. So for those that are able to participate, we've been spending our time doing online conferences. We engage in Bible plans together as a team so that we can discuss how to grow through this. So checking in on your teams is super important. So before we move on, I just want to make sure that you guys are still with me. So if you are, put in the chat, check in, hashtag check in. Our next point is consistency and goals. So with goals, we want to make sure that the goals that we are setting, that we're setting goals weekly and that we're consistent with that. So making sure that we're keeping up with the consistent flow of operation. Just because we're not meeting physically in the church, we still have things that we need to keep up with every week to make sure that our ministries are flowing. So keeping those routines in place and delegating tasks and giving our volunteers things to work on that may align. They may or may not, but most times they align with what they would normally be doing in a regular church service. So the way that our teams are structured, we have someone whose specific responsibility it is to schedule people for the month. Another person, they're supposed to pull the curriculum for the week. And with the curriculum, when we were in a physical church, they would be pulling it for our volunteers to be able to prepare to teach on Sundays. Now that we are in virtual services, they're still pulling those every week so that we can give those out to parents on Sundays. That's an engagement piece, is that we're relying on our parents to facilitate the spiritual development of the kids and be involved and engaged in that process. The other part of that is teaching. So again, we're not meeting every week, but our teachers still have responsibilities. So if you're scheduled to serve that week, our teachers have the responsibility of making videos demonstrating the activities that we would have done in a small group. And again, those go out to parents to play. And one thing I love about this idea is that the videos keep some normalcy for the kids, being able to see familiar faces. But on the other side of that, it keeps routine in place for the volunteers, because the last thing we want is for our volunteers to feel displaced during this time and to become disconnected. So we continue to use their gifts, even though they may look a little bit different during this time. And I'm not going to lie, that was a challenge for some of our team members who felt that they weren't creative enough to transfer certain skills over to a virtual platform. And creativity is such a funny thing, because I think that a lot of times we have this idea in our head of what a creative looks like. And you know what, that image that we've created is accurate, it's right. But I think creativity is so much more. I think that it's the ability to just look at something in a different way, to give new perspective to an idea. So I like to reiterate that we are all creative because, and here's the corniness again, we all came from the Creator, and we're made in His image. So we are creative. And what that made me think of was in the Bible, when Jesus met the first disciples. And so Simon, Peter, and Andrew, they were on a boat and they were fishing because they fished for a living. And so Jesus saw them and He said, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to be fishers of men." He said, "I will show you how to fish for people." And that excites me when I hear that, because God is going to allow us to use skills that we already have. He's going to allow us to identify those strengths and those skills in our team members that they're already good at, that they're already doing, to be able to reach those that we need to connect with and to reel them in and engage them. And so with that, two things have to take place. One, and this aligns with our check-in process, get to know your team. In order to be able to highlight the strengths of your team members and to know what they're good at, you have to spend time with them. The second part of that is Jesus said, "Come follow me and I will show you." What we know is that learning comes from modeling and coaching. So there has to be a level of discipling taking place. There has to be a place where we're creating the culture where creativity and excellence is encouraged and where it's actually the standard. And one way I do this is I include them in the decision making process, especially when it comes to creativity and social engagement. I want to empower them to implement their ideas. There have been times when I'm sitting there trying to work on stuff on my own, maybe because it's last minute or I'm just kind of up late thinking about things. And I get stuck and I'm like, okay, wait, I have a whole team for this. I have several teams for this. So I'll say, hey guys, I'm stuck. I need your help. So I say, I need each person to give me one idea for social engagement. Just one. I don't ask for much, just one idea. So as people are putting in ideas and we're building them out and we're making sure that they align with the vision, I'll notice, like, hey, you haven't said anything and you haven't said anything. So I'm gonna need you to come give me some more ideas. And what this does is it creates buy-in, because when those you lead are excited about the ideas, they will push for them. And they're gonna be excited about their own ideas being implemented. Because if they aren't excited about them, then the people that you're trying to reach won't be either. Um, have you guys ever seen someone just like post something on social media and it's just kind of like they just shared it, they added no context to it? And I'm like, did you post that because are you going to that? Or are you just sharing that just for the sake of it? Like there's no enthusiasm behind it. So you don't really know, like, what am I supposed to do with this information? And sometimes people are going to input ideas that maybe we necessarily wouldn't have come up with on our own. But we have to remember that our teams aren't here to serve us. We're here to serve them. And so it's our responsibility to always be building them up and pushing them to stretch their creativity. Like I said before, there have been times when I've tried to do things on my own, and we know that even the best leader can't do it all alone. So there has to be a willingness and there has to be an ability to delegate the burden of responsibilities. That's so important. You need to be proactive with your plans and hold other people accountable for their role in implementing them. Also, with that, you need to be a strong leader. You have to have discernment to make sure that things are supporting the goals and the vision of the ministry. And if they aren't, don't be afraid to pull rank to get things done and make sure that they're done well, because ultimately you are the one that's responsible for the success of how we engage and how we build relationships and maintain those within our communities. So we've talked about how we're going to stabilize our adults, how we're going to get them on board. Our second part is we need to figure out what it was that our child lost, what they feel like they're missing, and how we can help meet that need. So the next one is assessing the needs of our community. So assessing the needs of our community. So the online experience that you are creating and subsequently the community that you are building is only as good as the need it fulfills. It's only as good as the need it fulfills. So it's important to have a strong understanding of the ministry vision and the goals, as well as an understanding of people and how to attune to their needs. Because this foundational understanding is going to make sure that the purpose of your ministry is continuously being aligned with solving your population's biggest worries and their most prevalent ones. And I was reading an article the other day, and it said that in every loss, there's a birth. And I was like, ooh, that's deep. And I know that it's hard to imagine that there could be something good or even empowering about losing something. But during those periods, our children are becoming more inventive. They're becoming more insightful. And if I've learned anything about grief over the last couple of years, it's that grief teaches us about ourselves. It teaches us what is valuable to us, what's important to us, what we want to hold dear to our hearts. And so when we become aware or start to notice these shifts, we're able to come up with a plan or choose activities that can facilitate their process of dealing with these changes. When we do that, then we're able to provide resources to families and prioritize their needs. So this helps to keep our ministry valuable to those that we're meant to reach, and people engage in things that they find valuable. So this is kind of the thought process behind how certain engagement activities are decided on. We want to make sure that our engagement pieces are supporting the vision of the ministry and also meeting the needs or the concerns of the kids and families that we're meant to love on. So for kids, this might be loss of connection with their peers, or they lost a structured setting for being able to learn or feeling safe. We were last week we did a planting activity, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we did a planting activity, and one of the questions I asked was like, what are some things that you guys are worried about? And I received an overwhelming response of coronavirus in my Cardi B voice. But I was just like, well, you guys know, there are things that happened before coronavirus, but yeah, we can talk about that. But everyone was just having this anxiety over feeling safe, and people aren't going to wash their hands, and I don't want to get sick. And so using that as a moment to support them in that anxiety and kind of process through and identify ways that, hey, your parents are keeping you safe this way, hey, you're going to be okay in this way. And so just making sure that we are providing that support. And so transitioning to that, we need to be able to put our ideas into motion. So our third one is practical implementation. So our ideas, like I said before, are created based on meeting a need for the child or the family. We want to keep a sense of normalcy in the midst of uncertainty. So for me, I'm not going to ask kids to do anything that I would not be willing to do myself. Really, I'm not going to ask anybody to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. An example of this is our church did a couple weeks ago, we did Spirit Week. And I was part of the team that was kind of putting ideas together for the lineup. And there were some things I was like, I don't think that that's something I want to participate in. Like, I don't think I'm good at that. Like, I don't want to do that. But what I realized, and I had to check myself on, is that we have to be the example for engagement, and we have to participate in the activities, because our teams and the parents and the kids follow our lead. They're not going to engage in something if the people that are putting it out there and promoting it aren't going to do that too. So making sure that we are being the example, setting the standard for engagement. Next, we have to choose things that reach the majority. And this has been a challenge for our youth ministry, where we'll try and throw out ideas, and maybe someone can't make a meeting time, or maybe someone doesn't have access to technology or the technology that we need to facilitate an event. So we realize that we can't just, make concessions for one or two people. We have to make sure that we're reaching the majority of kids. And so maybe some kids can't participate, but the hope is that we're going to have a little bit of diversity in what we put out there, so that, at some point, everyone's going to be able to engage in the ministry. When we have our kids on calls, we poll the kids, even the kids ministry and the youth will poll the kids, and we'll say like, hey, what did you think about that? Did you like this activity? Should we do more stuff like this? We'll ask them what they have access to, what they're interested in, because I'm a respecter of time, and I don't like to waste my time. So the last thing I want to do is put energy into preparing activities and people aren't interested in them, or people don't want to do them. So making sure that we're getting their feedback so that everyone's happy on both ends. The next one is connecting learning to our experiences. Connecting learning. So whether that's a skill that we're teaching kids, whether that's awareness about themselves or other people, we want to make sure that there is a component of learning involved. And I might get in trouble for saying this, but everything doesn't have to be spiritually based. I think we do that on Sunday. Our Sunday pieces talk about Jesus and talks about the Bible and his truths. But we want to make sure that some of the things that we decide to do are centered around having fun and helping them to take their mind off of whatever they're worried about, whatever they're going through, And we just want them to be able to engage with their peers, because one of our values is, peer relationships, building peer relationships, healthy ones. So some ideas that we've done were, we did a pajama and paint night. So we had kids get a dress up in their pajamas, and we had like a late night activity. I think it was like at 8:30 time, and we taught them how to paint either like a unicorn or a horse or something, and the kids loved it. Also, we're preparing to do an Anwa Kids Got Talent. So just different ways to get them creative and get their ideas flowing of how they can just engage with their peers and get that social connection that they might be missing because they're not in school. But if you so choose to add that component of making it spiritual, that is an awesome idea as well. But I want to make sure that we're creating a memory with the activities so that the Bible is embedded in them. So, an activity that we did last week was a sow where you want to grow, and it was a planting party. And I like this. I love using metaphors, especially in play therapy, but we talked about the environments needed for a plant to grow, and we related that to what kids need to grow. So we know that plants need soil, water, sunlight, just as kids need safety, love, and stimulation. And as we discussed the seeds and the idea of seeds as starting as just like an idea or a dream or a prayer, we talked about how to nurture that for those for our future. So as they were planting, we were able to weave in the story of the parable of the sower. So we got to it, like what type of ground will allow the seed to take root and blossom. And so we had the kids to check their soil and to make sure that it was good soil and good ground. So I just think that making things come to life with tangible things that they had an experience with is going to make the stuff stick. So when I get back, when we get back to regular church and I ask someone about the story of the sower, they might not be able to tell me about the parable. They're going to be like, what is a parable again? But if I say, what did we talk about at the planting party? They're going to be able to recall that. So again, connecting an experience with the learning process. The last part that I want to hone in with the practical implementation is this idea of patience. So community building and engagement is a lengthy process. So it's important to stay focused on your goals and patiently wait for the results to validate your hard work and the strategy that you've put in. Because without patience, it's easy for us to get caught up in this desire for instant gratification. I think especially because we're virtual and there's social media, that we're constantly trying to put out content and we're constantly trying to make sure that we're keeping up with the next thing. But our community is going to benefit from our ability to remain confident throughout the process, to be intentional about the things that we put out. Don't just put things out just to put them out. Again, making sure that they're aligning with the purpose of your ministry, what your goal is, what you're trying to reach. And with patience, I'll give you as an example. So on Monday, we launched our conversation hours with our youth ministry. So this is a space where we're going to allow teens to discuss real things that they're facing in a safe space with their peers. And I was super excited because I was like, you know what? People are tuning in. I think this is gonna be a hit. So we were talking like the whole time. We were talking about boundaries and safe spaces. And in the last 10 minutes, a teen says, yeah, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but we're just not feeling it. And I was like, oh, it kind of hit my ego. It humbled me a little bit. So I was like, can you say more about that? Can you let me know what you're feeling? So they broke it down, and initially I had mixed reactions because I was feeling myself. I was like, this is such a good activity. They're engaged. People are showing up. And then she hits me with that. But I can appreciate it because from a counseling perspective, the fact that these teens even tuned into the call, because we know teens, they don't have to do anything. They choose to do what they want to do. They didn't have to come on their free time and spend an hour with us. And they certainly didn't have to share what they were thinking. So the fact that they showed up and then they felt safe enough to let us know what was happening, I was like, okay, that's a small win. So they were telling us how they felt about it. just a little background, right before we went on quarantine, our ministry went through a bit of a transition period. So they're still adjusting with that. And then trying to do this virtual engagement has been a bit of a rocky period. So they were able to share with us. At the end of it, I was just like, you know what? Because I believe in child autonomy. I'm not going to make them do what they don't want to do. I'm not going to force them to participate. But I just said, you know what? Your feelings are valid. That's okay. I understand where you're coming from. But as the adults, we are going to continue to show up every Monday at 7:30. If you would like to participate, I would love to have you on. If you don't, that's your choice as well. But we're going to be consistent and we're going to be present if you guys choose to show up. Needless to say, that call ended pretty awkwardly. But directly after, a student reached out to me and she was like, Miss Zoe, can I just be honest with you? And I was like, sure, go ahead. And they were just kind of telling me all these things that they were feeling. And I just interjected and I was like, you know what? Heartbreak makes it hard for us to want to try again. And I think a lot of times we think about heartbreak as a romantic relationship type thing. But heartbreak comes when we get disconnected from people. Heartbreak happens when things are changing around us and we have no control over it. Those are things that break our heart. So I said, you know what? It makes it hard for us to want to try again, but it's worth it. And so I just want to encourage you guys to be the people that make it worth it. And she went on to say, you know what? We're going to come around. It's just going to take a little bit of time. We're a really good group once you get to know us, but we're going to come around. And I said, you know what? We already love you. And we're patient enough to wait for you to love us back. So I say all that to say, trust the process. That engagement might seem hard right now, but it will come along. You just have to keep working at it and trusting your teams and making sure that you're doing things with intentionality. So really quickly, because I know I've went over my time, I'm going to give you guys a couple resources that we use at our ministry. So the first one, we've talked about our curriculum a lot. We use Orange Curriculum, and Orange Curriculum is literally like a heaven sent instrument. It's like as if God himself made this and he dropped it down and he was like, be blessed. Like it has literally everything that you could ever think of, things that you probably wouldn't even think of. There are tools for teaching. There's video content. There's music videos for praise and worship, small group activities. There's a parent app where it gives resources for how to have difficult conversations with your kids. Literally everything. There's a media package. So if you're struggling in the social media area, there's content that you can promote along with your messages. The second thing, Orange Curriculum also has a conference every year. So it's normally in Atlanta. This year, it's going to be virtual. So it's at the end of this month. But the sessions I looked at were how to build your kids' ministry up, how to build your youth ministry or family ministry. There were leadership sessions, why it's important, who's at the table, parent resources, all of that stuff. And it looked really amazing. So I'm taking about 5 or 6 of both my kids and youth teams taking them. We're going to participate in that to hopefully help us to build up how we utilize our curriculum. The second thing is Canva. So if you don't have, and I know our marketing director is probably cringing at the sound of this, but if you don't have a graphic designer on your team, Canva is the ultimate way to get social media content. It's very user-friendly. There are templates you can use, and it'll just help you kind of facilitate that promotion piece if you need social media content. He also sent me the creationswap.com app, which is another graphic tool where you can have like pre-made inspirational posts or devotional posts that you can use as well. The last thing, about a month ago, I went to a virtual conference. It was called Youth Pastors Co. Summit, and it was a 2-day conference, and it was literally life-changing. So they have a Facebook group. I don't know if they're going to be doing anything else, but they have a Facebook group where it's just a good resource for you to build community. Lots of different people do collaborative things. They drop ideas in there. So if you want to join that or look that up on Facebook, that's another great resource. And I would also just say, don't be afraid to reach outside of your church, which you guys are doing now. reach outside of your church to get resources or to talk to other people and see how they do things and how they do ministry. So that's all that I have for you guys today. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me during these technical difficulties. So right now we're going to do our question and answer piece. If you guys want to drop questions below.
Yeah, so we're really excited about everything that Zoe just shared with us. You did such an awesome job. She's a great leader. And the questions are coming in. So please put them in the comment section. We'll try to get a good bit of them. So let's just start. So Chrissy Miller wants to know, how often do you engage children or youth on a weekly basis during the quarantine time?
So for engagement, we have, for both our kids and our youth, we have our Sunday curriculum piece, and that's where we teach the Bible lessons. Throughout the week, each of our ministry groups engages twice a week. So our kids ministry, we have an event on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and our youth ministry does Mondays and Saturdays.
Okay, great. All right, these questions are rolling in, so I'm gonna keep them coming at you for a little bit. So Crystal Hunter wants to know, do you have any specific tips for getting buy-in from parents, especially with virtual ministry?
You know what, I think that's a challenge that every youth ministry is going to have. I think what I've learned, and this is even before quarantine, the way that we get buy-in is when we ask parents to be involved. When we ask parents directly to do things for the ministry, they feel as if they're needed, and people always love to feel needed. So they're going to promote and they're going to engage and do whatever they can to help. A lot of times I feel like it should be a partnership, but sometimes we just deal with the kids and we kind of forget about the parents. So something that we're doing in both of our ministries on social media, we're dedicating a day, like I think Tuesday, it's going to be like a thank you Tuesday or something, where we're just providing parenting resources. So when we're doing things that are catered more towards parents, I think that they'll have the buy-in that, this is meant for them as a support to them as well.
I love that. All right. So Jessica Washington wants to know, do you make sure everyone has the supplies at home prior to planning the various activities?
That's a really good question. So actually, for Easter, we decided that we were going to make Easter baskets. So again, Orange Curriculum, they had an Easter jam, big blowout thing where it was specifically made for virtual churches to implement during Easter time. So we were like, you know what, they're asking for some really specific things. So we wanted to create Easter baskets for the kids, including some of those items that they would need. But what we did was we went ahead and planned out the next 4 activities, and we included those activities in the Easter basket along with the schedule. And we had a drive-by Easter basket pickup. So we had parents RSVP for how many baskets they needed. We made them, and then literally parents just drove by and we handed it to them. So we made sure that they did have those activities. If not, if there are parents or families that wanted to participate and they didn't get one of those baskets, we still supply them the supply list so they know what they need for the activity.
I love that. And you guys should know that all of the adults wanted an Easter basket, and we were slightly jealous of the children. All right. So a question from LaWanda Stacy. She wants to know, how would you recommend getting buy-in for time and resources for kids in youth ministry if this has never been the reality of that church, and the church may have a much older population?
I think you have to stress your expertise in the area, and you have to really be an advocate for why it's necessary. What I like to do is, we're literally the next generation. And I'm gonna say this probably really off key, but we're literally raising people to take your place. So you want to make sure that we're supporting the people that are going to grow up to be the next leaders. So you have to emphasize that with whoever you need to market that to make sure that they're aware that you guys are present. A lot of times kids are kind of like off in the back, or you don't really see them. So making sure that they're incorporated in the day-to-day services. So whether that's for us, we did Easter speeches, we made sure that was streamed with our adult service. If there's an event coming up, even when we're in church, so Mother's Day, prior to us having quarantine, we were going to plan a big ceremony where the kids were going to come out in the middle of church so that you're constantly aware that, hey, we're here. And so when you see them, when they're in your face a little bit more, you're gonna realize that there are needs that need to be met.
I love it. I love it. Okay, these questions are rolling in. I'm going to try to get a few more. If we don't get all of your questions, please, if you have any follow-ups or we don't get to your questions, you can send those to admin@allnationsatl.org. But I'm going to try to get a few more questions in, if that's okay with you, Zoe.
Of course.
Because this is a hot area. Everybody wants your expertise. So Jessica Washington wants to know, how do you get the youth who are not familiar with church or church culture to get engaged?
So that comes into play with the other piece that I said, that everything doesn't need to be spiritual based. So making sure that the events are just something that a kid is going to want to participate in. So we're doing a Netflix movie night. Even our conversation hours, I've encouraged our kids that have joined, hey, your friends don't have to be a member of this church. If you want to invite them, go ahead and send them the link, because eventually they're going to get that spiritual guidance regardless. But we want to create an atmosphere where they feel comfortable, and then we weave that in. It's like a fine dance. You gotta.
I love that. I love that. All right, this is a good question, but a quick one for you. So Karina Dobbs wants to know, what platform do you use for meetings?
We use Zoom, but we're currently working on transitioning to a better platform. But currently we use Zoom or Google Hangouts.
Okay, cool. And then Tiara Hedgepeth wants to know, how do you break down your age groups within your Next Generation ministry?
So we don't have a nursery yet, but that would be under kids eventually. Right now, our kids are broken into 4-year-olds all the way to 5th grade. And even in that, when we break into small groups, it's pre-K through 1st, 2nd and 3rd, and then 4th and 5th. Our youth is 6th grade through 12th grade. Eventually, we don't have a huge diversity in that range, so we have them all together. Eventually, when we grow, we're going to break that off into middle school versus high school. We also have 6th graders, and I think that that's a really tricky age. Their parents might feel like youth group is too old for the 6th graders for an 11-year-old, so some 6th graders still attend kids ministry, so they're with the 4th and 5th graders. And our curriculum supports our kids' curriculum supports 6th graders as well. It's a preteen curriculum.
Good. Well, guys, you guys have a lot of questions. We hope this is helpful in some small way. Zoe, you have given us so much on tonight. I want to just leave you guys with this quote that Zoe said that just changed my life. Creating a memory with your activities so the Bible is embedded in your kids and youth. I think that's so important. It's not just activities for activity's sake, but a memory so that the Bible is embedded. I love all of the nuggets that you gave on tonight. Guys, just a round of applause for Ms. Zoe Shaw. If you got, again, any follow-up questions or items that you want to know about or resources, we are going to send you out some of these materials, but you can also ask your questions by contacting admin@allnationsatl.org. Thank you, Zoe, for being with us on tonight. A couple of things, guys, before you go. Night 3 has been awesome of this conference, but there is more. Come on, y'all. There is more. So tomorrow night, night 4, the incomparable Channing B. Nash is going to be with us, and she's going to talk about communication and administration. And then we've got the demon slayer himself, Mr. Cut Up 101. We've got Pastor Torres Solomon is going to be in the building. Y'all, he's been itching to talk to some folks because he has not been in a church building in a while. So he's going to talk to you about crisis management and support leadership. Do not be surprised if he starts to prophesy on this line and cast the devil out. I'm really excited about what happened in night 3. We look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow for night 4. Have a great evening. We love you all. Take care.